funny how you never really see the cracks until they're too wide to fix. Kate and I had what you might call a typical love story. We met in college. She was a senior. I was a junior. I remember the first time I saw her at a house party, laughing with her friends, effortlessly beautiful with this light in her eyes that made it impossible not to smile when you were around her. She had a way of making life feel lighter, easier. I fell hard. After we graduated, we built our life together, got married, moved into a cozy little house in the suburbs, both of us working our jobs and dreaming about the future. Everything seemed solid. Sure, we had the usual fights about money, or me leaving my socks everywhere, or her being glued to her phone, but nothing that felt like it could threaten what we had. At least that's what I thought. Looking back now, I realized the signs were there long before I saw them. It started small. Kate started getting more distant, but I didn't think too much of it at first. We both worked long hours, me in IT, her at a marketing firm. So we'd come home tired, crash on the couch, watch Netflix in silence, maybe talk a little about our days. But she seemed distracted. I noticed her texting more, smiling at her phone in ways she didn't when we were together. When I asked her about it, she said it was just her friend, Ashley, keeping her entertained. Ashley was Kate's best friend from childhood. They were inseparable, the kind of friends who knew every secret, every heartbreak, every detail of each other's lives. I always liked Ashley. She had a dry sense of humor and was fiercely protective of Kate. But in the past year or so, it felt like Ashley was always around. They'd go out for drinks on Fridays, have brunch on Sundays, and text constantly. I never questioned it, though. Best friends, right? The first real red flag came when Kate started using a particular cab service. We lived in a city where everyone used ride-sharing apps, but Kate started insisting on using the same driver every time. I remember her saying how convenient it was, how Ben, the driver, was always polite and on time, and how he knew her schedule, so she didn't have to wait around for random drivers. She said it made her life easier. At the time, I didn't see any harm in it. But then, her behavior started to change in subtle ways. She started dressing up more, even for small errands, little things like wearing perfume to the grocery store or putting on makeup when she was just running out to grab coffee. It wasn't like her. Kate had always been pretty laid back, the type who only really dressed up for work or special occasions. But now it felt like she was trying to impress someone. I started paying more attention. She'd come home later than usual, saying she had to stay late at work or that she and Ashley had gone out for drinks. And at first, I believed her. Why wouldn't I? Kate had never given me a reason to doubt her, and we'd always had a strong foundation of trust. But the nagging feeling in my gut told me something wasn't right. The tipping point came one weekend when she said she was meeting Ashley for brunch. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it, but something made me hesitate that day. After she left, I felt this urge to check the ride-sharing app we both had on our phones. I don't know why, but I looked up her trip history. That's when I noticed the same name again, Ben. The driver she always used. I scrolled back through the weeks. Every time she claimed to be meeting Ashley, she was using Ben's cab. Every single time. That's when it hit me. She wasn't just using his service because it was convenient. Something else was going on. I told myself I was being paranoid, that it was probably nothing, but I couldn't shake the feeling. The next weekend, she said she was going to meet Ashley again, and I decided to follow her. It felt wrong, sneaky and pathetic, but I had to know. I couldn't sit in the dark anymore. She called for Ben's cab like clockwork. I watched from the window as she stepped into the car, dressed in a way she never dressed for just hanging out with a friend. I grabbed my keys and followed them at a distance, keeping just far enough behind so she wouldn't notice me. I didn't know what I expected to find, but I sure as hell wasn't ready for what I saw. They didn't go to Ashley's place. They went to a little cafe downtown, the kind with soft lighting and couples sitting close, hands touching over cups of coffee. I parked across the street, watching through the window as she and Ben sat together, laughing, leaning in close, his hand brushing against hers. I could barely breathe. The truth was staring me in the face, but I still didn't want to believe it. Maybe they were just friends? Maybe she had met him through Ashley? But then I saw the way she looked at him, the same way she used to look at me when we were first dating, like he was the only person in the room. I snapped a few photos from my phone. Part of me hated myself for it, for turning into someone who needed proof. But I wasn't thinking clearly. I was hurt, confused, angry. all of it swirling around in my head, crashing into each other like a storm I couldn't escape. I couldn't stop watching them. They left the cafe after an hour, and I followed them again, my heart pounding in my chest. They didn't head back to our neighborhood. Instead, they drove to a park on the outskirts of town, quiet, private. I watched from a distance as they sat on a bench, Kate's head resting on his shoulder, his arm wrapped around her waist. It was like someone had punched me in the gut. This was more than just flirting. This was real. For the next week, I started following her whenever I could. I became obsessed, needing to know how deep this went. I started tracking her, using every excuse to leave work early or come home late so I could check on her movements. I followed them to coffee shops, bars, even a horror movie one night where I watched them walk out of the theater, her hand in his. Everywhere they went, I was there, always in the shadows, always watching. Each time I saw them together, it felt like I was being stabbed in the heart, but I couldn't stop. I needed to know. I needed to gather everything, to confront her with the truth she was hiding from me. The worst part was how much she still acted normal at home. She'd come back from her meetings with Ashley, smiling, asking about my day like nothing had changed. But everything had changed, and I couldn't bear it anymore. I didn't know it yet, but the pieces were about to fall into place. I was about to learn that Ben wasn't just some random cab driver who had caught Kate's eye. He was connected to her life in ways I hadn't imagined, and that connection would make the betrayal all the more painful. But that part of the story comes later. For now, I just kept watching, waiting for the moment when I would finally confront her and shatter the illusion she was living. The next few days were torture. Every time Kate left the house, I couldn't help but wonder if she was seeing him again. Ben, the cab driver who had somehow wormed his way into her life. I was still following her, collecting scraps of evidence like a man possessed, but I couldn't confront her yet. I wasn't ready. I needed to know why. Why him? Why this? On Wednesday, she told me she was meeting Ashley again. That's when it clicked. Ashley. Of course, she was the common thread. Kate had said that she and Ashley had been spending more time together. And now I was starting to realize that every single one of Kate's excuses somehow involved her. It wasn't just that they were best friends. Something more was going on, and I needed to figure it out. So I followed her. Again, this time I saw them at a quiet little wine bar downtown. It was the middle of the afternoon, too early for most people to be drinking, but there they were, seated at a small table in the corner. The way Kate leaned in close to Ben, the way she smiled at him, it was like I didn't even exist in her world anymore. I took out my phone, snapping photos from a distance, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear my own thoughts. There was a part of me that wanted to storm in there, to confront them right then and there, to demand answers. But another part of me, the part that was slowly being eaten away by doubt and betrayal, wanted to know why. What had I done to deserve this? I stayed in my car, parked across the street, for what felt like hours. They eventually left the bar, walking together down the street, her arm linked with his. They looked so comfortable together, like they had been doing this for weeks, maybe even months. I followed them to a park again. This time, it wasn't just a quiet bench on the outskirts of town. They went deeper into the park, where the trees grew thick and the paths were less traveled. I didn't dare get too close, but I could see them sitting on the grass, Ben lying back while Kate rested her head on his chest, his fingers running through her hair. It was too much. I couldn't just sit there anymore. I drove home, my mind racing with questions I didn't have answers to. That night, I barely spoke to her. She came home like nothing had happened, kissed me on the cheek, asked me about work, then slipped into bed like it was just another normal day. But for me, it wasn't normal. It was a nightmare. The next day, I decided to take things further. I needed more than just blurry photos and half-hearted observations. I needed to know what they were saying. I wanted to hear it for myself. I bought a small recorder, the kind you could slip into a pocket or leave somewhere unnoticed. It felt crazy, like something out of a bad spy movie, but I didn't care. I needed the truth, even if it broke me. That Friday, Kate said she was meeting Ashley for lunch. Again, this time, I knew better. I planted the recorder in her car before she left, hidden under the passenger seat. It was risky, but I had to take the chance. I couldn't keep driving myself insane with the not knowing. When she came home that evening, I retrieved the recorder, my hands shaking as I pressed play. At first, there was nothing, just the sound of the engine, the hum of the road. Then a voice. Kate's voice, laughing softly, talking about something mundane, work, maybe, or plans for the weekend. But then I heard his voice. Ben. He was with her in the car. They weren't talking about anything romantic at first, just small talk. But then the conversation shifted. I can't believe you're still going back home to him, Ben said, his voice casual, as if they were discussing what to have for dinner. What am I supposed to do? Kate replied a little too defensively. It's not like I can just up and leave. Not yet anyway. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Not yet, he asked, his tone teasing. I thought you were done with him. I am, she said quickly. I mean, emotionally, I'm already gone. It's complicated. Complicated. That word echoed in my head, bouncing around like a bullet ricocheting off the walls of my mind. What the hell was complicated? We had built a life together. We had plans, dreams. And now she was telling this stranger, this cab driver, that she was emotionally done with me? I kept listening, even though it felt like the walls were closing in on me. You know, Ben said, his voice low, I've wanted you for a long time. Ever since that party at Ashley's. I saw you across the room, and I couldn't stop thinking about you. But you were with him, so I didn't make a move. My blood turned to ice. A party at Ashley's? He had seen her there? And then it all clicked into place. Ashley. Ben wasn't just some random guy who happened to fall into Kate's life. He was connected to Ashley. And that party? It must have been months ago, maybe even longer. That's when it started. That's when this whole thing was set in motion. The anger inside me boiled over. Ashley had known. She had known this whole time. And instead of being a friend, she had helped her cousin, because Ben had to be Ashley's cousin, worm his way into Kate's heart. The worst part? Kate didn't even know. In that moment, I realized something dark and twisted. Ashley didn't just disapprove of me. She had actively sabotaged my marriage. She must have fed Ben details about Kate, what she liked, what she wanted, so he could swoop in and become the man she thought Kate deserved. I was shaking, my hands trembling with rage as I put the recorder down. This wasn't just about Kate and Ben anymore. This was bigger than that. This was a betrayal that reached into the very core of the relationships I thought I could trust. Now, it wasn't just about finding out the truth. It was about revenge. On all of them. Kate, Ben, Ashley. They were all going to pay. After hearing that recording, something in me snapped. It wasn't just about Kate cheating on me anymore. It was about betrayal on a level I never imagined possible. Ashley, the person Kate trusted more than anyone in the world, had orchestrated the entire thing. She had handed Kate over to her cousin, feeding him everything he needed to get close to her. It was sick, and I wasn't going to let it go. For days, I couldn't even look at Kate without feeling the bile rise in my throat. The woman I loved, the woman I trusted with my heart, had fallen into the trap her so-called best friend had set. And the worst part? Kate didn't even seem to know she was a pawn in Ashley's game. She thought this was real, that Ben was this perfect man who just happened to come into her life. I wanted to confront her right away, to blow everything up and watch her world collapse. But I knew that would be too easy. I wanted more than a confrontation. I wanted revenge that cut deep. So I bided my time, letting things unfold while I quietly set the trap. First, I needed more evidence. I already had photos of them together, her hand on his, the way they laughed like they were the only two people in the world, but I needed something that would hit harder, something that would leave no room for doubt. That weekend, she told me she was going out again. Another brunch with Ashley. The words made my skin crawl. I smiled, kissed her on the cheek, and watched as she left, knowing exactly where she was really going. Ben would pick her up just like always. This time, though, I was ready. I'd been planning this moment for days. I followed them again, but this time I kept my distance, careful not to tip them off. I knew they would end up somewhere secluded, somewhere they could be alone. It didn't take long. They drove out of the city, heading toward the outskirts, where the roads grew narrow and the trees thick. My heart raced as I trailed them to an empty parking lot on the edge of town. It was one of those places that teenagers use for make-out sessions or people went to when they wanted to be out of sight. There wasn't a soul around. I parked my car a good distance away, hidden behind a small cluster of trees, and watched as they pulled in and parked. I sat there in the darkness of my car, waiting. I knew what was coming, but seeing it with my own eyes still felt like a punch to the gut. Through the windshield, I could see them sitting in the front seat of the cab. At first, they just talked, but then I saw her lean in and kiss him. It wasn't some innocent peck. It was passionate, raw. The kind of kiss that left no room for doubt about what was going to happen next. My heart hammered in my chest, a mix of fury and disbelief as I watched them start to undress, right there in the car. I couldn't tear my eyes away, even though every fiber of my being screamed at me to stop watching. I fumbled with my phone, hands shaking as I hit record, capturing every second of their betrayal. They were having sex in the back of the cab, her body moving against his hands gripping her like she was his. I couldn't hear anything from where I was, but I didn't need to. The way their bodies moved together said it all. It was real. She was cheating on me, and I had all the proof I needed. When they finished, they sat there for a few moments, catching their breath. She laughed softly, running her hand through her hair like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't just shattered our marriage in the front seat of some stranger's car. Then they drove off, leaving me alone in the dark. I stayed there for a while, trying to process what I had just seen. The rage inside me burned hotter than it ever had before. But now I had the evidence. Now I could destroy them. The next few days were a blur. I went to work, came home, and acted like everything was fine, but underneath I was barely holding it together. Kate still acted like nothing was wrong, like she wasn't sneaking off with some other man whenever she had the chance. She smiled, cooked dinner, kissed me goodnight, and it made me sick to my core. But I knew better now. I had all the proof I needed, photos, videos, and that damn recording. And I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to ruin everything she thought she had. First, I needed to figure out Ashley's role in all of this. I knew she was the mastermind. She'd been helping Ben, setting him up to be the perfect guy for Kate. I couldn't help but wonder how long she had been planning this. Was it because she didn't like me? Or was it something more? Did she resent our marriage? I needed to know. I started looking into Ben. It wasn't hard. He was a cab driver. But with Ashley feeding him all the information about Kate, he had made himself into this ideal version of a man she couldn't resist. It was almost impressive how well he played the part, but I knew that behind the charming smile and casual conversation, he was just a tool Ashley was using to tear us apart. One night, while Kate was asleep, I went through her phone. She always left it charging on the nightstand, never suspecting that I would look through it. And that's when I found it. Text messages between her and Ashley. They talked about everything. Kate's frustrations with our marriage, how Ben was making her feel alive again, and how she didn't know what to do. Ashley encouraged her, telling her that maybe this was the universe's way of giving her a second chance at happiness. She said things like, "You deserve to feel alive again, and he's so perfect for you, isn't he?" And then one text from Ashley. "You know Ben's had his eye on you since the party. He told me you were exactly his type." I froze. So it was true. Ashley had known. She had been orchestrating this from the start, pushing Ben toward Kate, knowing exactly what would happen. She had betrayed me, betrayed Kate, all for some sick idea of what Kate deserved. The final blow came when I found another message from Ashley, sent just a few days ago. "Once you leave him, you'll be free. Ben's already planning for the future. I'm so excited for you." That's when I realized it wasn't just an affair. They were planning to leave me. Together. With all the evidence in hand, I started planning my revenge. I wasn't going to confront Kate just yet. Not until I had everything lined up. I wanted her to feel the same shock and betrayal I had felt when I found out the truth. And I wanted Ashley to feel it too. The first step was to hit Kate where it would hurt the most, her reputation. She prided herself on being a good person, a loyal friend, someone who always did the right thing. But that image was about to come crashing down. I made copies of the photos and videos, keeping them safe on a USB drive. I also compiled a timeline of everything I had found, screenshots of her text messages with Ashley, photos of her with Ben, and, of course, the video of them having sex in the cab. It was a thorough collection of evidence that left no room for doubt. But I wasn't just going to confront her. No, that would be too easy. I wanted to take everything from her before she even knew what was happening. The hardest part of revenge is the waiting. You feel the fire burning in your chest, your anger itching to explode, but you have to be patient. I had to be patient. Every day, I'd wake up next to Kate, pretending everything was fine, playing my part as the loving husband while knowing full well that everything was falling apart behind the scenes. It wasn't just about Kate anymore. It was about the entire web of deceit that had been spun around me. Ashley's betrayal stung just as much as Kate's, maybe even more in some ways. She had positioned herself as Kate's closest confidant, all the while manipulating her, pushing her toward Ben. And Ben, well, he was just a pawn, but that didn't make him any less guilty. I began planning my next steps carefully, methodically. Kate was still blissfully unaware, going about her day-to-day life as if nothing had changed. She'd smile at me over dinner, tell me about her day, and I'd nod along, knowing I was days away from blowing her world apart. I wasn't going to destroy her reputation right away. No, that would come later. For now, I wanted to see her squirm. I wanted her to question everything, to doubt her decisions, to feel the pressure build until she couldn't take it anymore. So I started subtly letting things slip. The first seed of doubt I planted came during a casual dinner. We were sitting at the kitchen table, talking about weekend plans. She mentioned she was going to meet Ashley again, of course, and that's when I dropped the first bomb. "You've been spending a lot of time with her lately," I said, keeping my tone light, like I wasn't accusing her of anything. "Don't you think Ben might get jealous?" Her fork paused halfway to her mouth, and for a split second, I saw a panic flash in her eyes. She quickly recovered, smiling as if it was no big deal. "Ben? Jealous?" She laughed awkwardly. "He's just my cab driver. Why would he care?" I shrugged, playing it cool. "I don't know. It just seems like you're really close with him, that's all." Her smile faltered for a second, but she didn't push it. She changed the subject quickly, moving on to some story about work, but I could tell the comment had landed. She was already thinking about it. That night, I checked her phone again after she fell asleep. I was almost disappointed to find that there weren't any new messages between her and Ashley. It seemed like she was being more careful, probably worried that I was starting to catch on. But that was fine. I had all the evidence I needed. This was just the warm-up. The next few days were filled with little moments like that, tiny seeds of doubt that I planted every chance I got. I'd make casual comments about how much she was texting or joke about how she must have a second life with all the time she was spending out of the house. She'd laugh it off, but I could see it was getting to her. She was starting to get more careful, more cautious, but it didn't matter. I had her right where I wanted her. Meanwhile, I was still collecting evidence. I followed her a couple more times, watching as she met Ben at cafes, took rides in his cab, or even just sat in his car while they talked for hours. She wasn't hiding it well. Maybe she thought I was too busy or too clueless to notice, but I saw everything. One night, she left her phone on the counter while she took a shower, and I couldn't resist checking it again. This time, I found what I was looking for, another conversation with Ashley. It was short, but it told me everything I needed to know. "Ashley, are you ready to tell him yet?" "Kate, I don't know. I think he's starting to get suspicious." "Ashley, you need to do it soon. Ben's waiting." "Kate, I just need a little more time." I stared at the screen, my pulse racing. So, they were planning for her to leave me. That was their endgame. It wasn't just an affair. It was a full-blown plan to destroy our marriage. Ashley had pushed Kate into Ben's arms, and now she was pushing her to end things with me. But they didn't know that I was already 2 steps ahead. Now that I had confirmation of their plans, I knew it was time to set my revenge in motion. I didn't want to just confront Kate. I wanted to pull the rug out from under her, to make sure there was no escape. And Ashley? She was going to feel the sting of this just as much as Kate. "He started with Ben?" It was easy enough to track him down. He wasn't exactly hiding. I waited until one afternoon when I knew Kate would be out. I drove across town to the area where I knew Ben often parked between shifts. It wasn't hard to find him. He was sitting in his car, smoking a cigarette, probably waiting for his next fare. He had no idea I was coming. I walked right up to his window, leaning in just enough to get his attention. He looked up, surprised but not alarmed. "You Ben?" I asked. "Yeah. Who's asking?" he replied, his voice casual. "I'm Kate's husband," I said, watching as his face drained of color. He sat up straight, eyes wide. I don't know what you're talking about, man." "Don't lie," I said, my voice cold. "I know everything." He swallowed hard, glancing around like he was trying to figure out if I was going to hit him, or worse. I could see the panic in his eyes, and it felt good. But I wasn't here to beat him up. That would have been too easy. No, I had bigger plans for him. I'm not going to hurt you, I said, leaning in a little closer. But I am going to ruin your life. What the hell are you talking about? He asked, his voice shaky. I've been watching you. I've got photos, videos, everything. You think you could just fuck my wife and get away with it? You got another thing coming. He didn't say anything, but I could see the fear in his eyes. He was scared, and he should be. I'm giving you a choice, I said, my voice low and menacing. You're going to tell Kate that it's over. You're going to cut her off completely. Tell her you're not interested anymore. If you don't, I'll send everything I have to your boss, to your friends. Hell, I'll even send it to your family. I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you are. He stared at me, his face pale. You're crazy, man. Maybe, I said, shrugging, but you don't want to find out just how far I'll go. He looked down at his hands, defeated. Fine, I'll do it. I'll tell her. Good, I said, standing up straight. You got until tomorrow. After that, if I see you near her again, I'll burn your whole life to the ground. I didn't wait for him to respond. I turned and walked away, feeling a sick sense of satisfaction settle in my gut. Ben was out of the picture, at least for now. But that was just the first step. With Ben dealt with, it was time to handle Ashley. She was the mastermind behind this whole thing, the one who had pushed Kate into the affair. And she was about to get exactly what she deserved. I waited until the weekend, knowing that Kate was planning to meet up with Ashley at her place. It was the perfect opportunity to confront them both, to watch everything unravel right in front of their eyes. That Saturday morning, Kate left the house as usual, telling me she was going to spend the day with Ashley. I smiled, kissed her goodbye, and told her to have a great time. Little did she know I was right behind her. I followed her to Ashley's house, parking a few streets away so they wouldn't see me. I waited for a while, letting them get comfortable inside, probably talking about how they were going to move forward with their little plan. Then I made my move. I walked up to the front door, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear their voices inside, laughing, chatting like nothing was wrong. I stood there for a moment, letting the rage build inside me, then knocked. The door opened, and there stood Ashley, her smile faltering when she saw me. Hey, I said, my voice cold. Mind if I come in? She didn't respond at first, but after a tense pause, she stepped aside, letting me into her house. Kate was sitting on the couch, her eyes widening in shock when she saw me. What are you doing here? She asked, her voice shaking. I think it's time we had a little chat, I said, looking between the two of them. About Ben, and about you. The tension in the room was suffocating. Kate sat frozen on the couch, her wide eyes darting between me and Ashley, who stood rigid by the door, her face pale. They didn't know what was coming, and I was going to enjoy watching their perfect little world crumble. What do you mean? Kate stammered, trying to force a smile, but I could see the panic building behind her eyes. Don't play dumb, Kate, I said, my voice cold and flat. I turned to Ashley, whose hands were clenched into fists at her sides. You've both been lying to me for months. You, her best friend, I said, spitting the words, orchestrated this whole thing, didn't you? Setting Kate up with your cousin like she's some prize to be handed out. Ashley's face hardened, but she didn't deny it. You don't know what you're talking about, she said, her voice steely, but there was a tremor beneath her calm facade. Oh, I think I know exactly what's been going on, I shot back, pulling out my phone. I swiped through the gallery until I found the video, the one of Kate and Ben, tangled together in the back seat of his cab, oblivious to the world outside. I threw the phone onto the coffee table, the screen facing them. Go ahead, I said, my voice thick with venom. Watch. See how it feels. Kate's face drained of color as she stared at the screen, her hand flying to her mouth. She didn't move for a moment, too shocked to react. Ashley's expression shifted from cold defiance to wide-eyed disbelief as she realized what I'd done. The room filled with the sound of ragged breathing as Kate finally turned her horrified gaze to me. I can explain, Kate whispered, her voice barely audible. Explain what? Exactly, I said, my voice rising, the fury that had been simmering for weeks now boiling over. Explain how you've been sneaking around behind my back with some lowlife cab driver? or how your best friend here set you up because she thought I wasn't good enough for you. Ashley stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. You don't understand, okay? Kate was miserable with you. She deserved better. She needed someone who could make her happy. And Ben's a goddamn cab driver. I shouted, cutting her off. And you decided to play matchmaker, knowing full well what you were doing. You thought you could just fix her life by destroying mine. I wasn't trying to destroy anything. Ashley snapped back, her voice filled with defensive heat. I was helping her. She pointed at me. You were suffocating her. She needed something more, something you couldn't give her. Kate finally spoke, her voice weak and broken. It wasn't supposed to be like this. You didn't what? I turned to her, my anger giving way to cold disbelief. You didn't mean to have sex with him? You didn't mean to lie to me over and over again? God, Kate, you don't even know how to own up to your mistakes, do you? Tears welled up in her eyes as she shook her head, her hands trembling in her lap. I didn't want to hurt you. Too late for that. I muttered, pacing the room. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to calm the storm inside me, but it was no use. The betrayal was too raw, too deep. You were going to leave me, weren't you? That's the plan, right? Leave me for Ben. She didn't answer, but the silence was answer enough. I turned back to Ashley, my eyes burning with rage. You really thought you could pull this off, didn't you? That I wouldn't find out? Ashley crossed her arms, her jaw clenched. You don't get it. Kate deserves to be happy, and you just don't make her happy anymore. I was helping her. Helping her? I repeated, my voice dripping with disdain. You weren't helping her, Ashley. You were controlling her. You fed her your twisted version of what happiness looks like and manipulated her into thinking she needed Ben. All because you didn't like me. Yeah, I didn't like you. Ashley shot back, her voice sharp. You were never good enough for her. I saw it from the start, and you know what? So did she. But she was too scared to admit it, so I gave her the push she needed. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Ashley, who had been there for all our ups and downs, the one who had toasted to our wedding day, had been secretly rooting for our marriage to fail from the beginning. My hands clenched in a fist, but I forced myself to stay calm. There was no point in losing control now. Push her? You think you were doing her a favor? I asked, my voice deadly quiet. What kind of friend destroys a marriage? Ashley opened her mouth to respond, but I wasn't done. You're not her friend, Ashley. You're a parasite, latching onto her life and feeding off her insecurities. You didn't push her because you wanted her to be happy. You pushed her because you wanted to see me suffer. And now, you've dragged her down with you. Kate sat on the couch, tears streaming down her face, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. Not yet. Not after everything. Did you really think you could just run off with him? I asked her, my voice barely above a whisper. That you could start a new life? And I just what? Disappear? She shook her head, sobbing now, unable to form words. The weight of her actions was finally crashing down on her. I could feel my anger shifting, morphing into something else, something colder. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was disgusted. Disgusted by the woman I had loved, by the lies she had told, by the friend who had betrayed us both. And I was done being their victim. I took a step back, crossing my arms as I watched them both fall apart. Ashley, usually so composed and sure of herself, was beginning to crack, her confidence slipping away as the reality of what she had done started to sink in. Kate was a mess, her face streaked with tears, her body trembling with the weight of her guilt. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment, savoring it. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment they realized they couldn't escape the consequences of their actions. You think you're going to get away with this? I said, my voice calm and steady now. You think you can just ruin my life and walk away without paying the price? Ashley's eyes flicked up to meet mine, defiant even in her fear. What are you going to do? She asked, her voice shaky but still laced with venom. You can't control her. You never could. I smirked, shaking my head slowly. Control her? No, I'm not going to control anyone. I'm just going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of people you both are. Kate gasped, her eyes wide with terror. Please don't. I've got everything. I continued, ignoring her pleas. The photos, the videos, the texts. It's all here, ready to be shared with whoever needs to see it. Ben's boss, your friends, your families. Hell, I'll even send it to your work, Kate. Let them see what kind of trustworthy employee you are. No, please, Kate cried, standing up, her voice desperate. Don't ruin my life. I'm sorry, I didn't mean for any of this. But you did, I said coldly, stepping closer. You made your choices, and now you'll live with them. I turned to Ashley, whose face had turned white as she realized the full extent of what I was saying. And you, I said, my voice low. You're going down with her. You think you're untouchable? I'll make sure everyone in your little circle knows what you did. You'll never get away with this. Ashley opened her mouth to argue, but the words died in her throat. She knew there was no way out now. I watched as Kate collapsed onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably, and I felt nothing. The woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted, was gone. She had been replaced by a stranger who had betrayed me in the worst possible way. And now, I was finally free of her. I didn't stay to watch the rest of their breakdowns. I didn't need to. I had said what I needed to say, and now it was time to walk away. The moment I stepped out of Ashley's house, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. The anger that had consumed me for weeks was finally gone, replaced by a cold clarity. Kate and Ashley had destroyed my life, but now they were going to live with the consequences. I had given Ben an ultimatum, and from what I knew of him, he'd follow through. He'd break things off with Kate, leaving her with nothing. And Ashley? She'd lose her best friend, her carefully crafted social life, and everything she had worked so hard to manipulate. They'd both be alone in the mess they'd created. As for me, I was free. Free from the lies, the betrayal, and the toxic relationship that had been dragging me down. There was no going back now. The next day, I started filing for divorce. I had already made copies of all the evidence and sent it to the lawyer. Kate wouldn't get a dime from me. She had forfeited that right the moment she decided to betray me. I didn't hear from Kate for a while after that. I assumed she was trying to figure out what to do, how to pick up the pieces of her shattered life. Part of me wondered if she was still trying to contact Ben, hoping he'd come back to her, but I doubted it. Ben was smart enough to know when to cut his losses. A week later, I received a message from Kate. She begged me to talk to her, to give her a chance to explain. She said she was sorry, that she had made a mistake, that she still loved me. But I didn't respond. I was done.